Hillstead Museum in Farmington, Connecticut is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Hillstead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained today just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Hillstead is their outstanding art collection. Hillstead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Hillstead is May Market and other seasonal events for the whole family. Hillstead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to you to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
Welcome to Hillstead Museum. If you are a poetry lover or just appreciate an evening of the arts in a beautiful setting, come to Hillstead Museum this summer for the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. The festival offers poetry and music on 3 Wednesday evenings and 2 Sunday afternoons all summer long. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music first, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audience to U.S. and state poets laureate, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate, informal setting of this historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture, and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our own common humanity.
For this series of television programs, we have picked readings from the summer of 2015. We hope they will give you an idea of what it's like to spend an evening or an afternoon in the Sunken Garden at Hillstead. And we hope you'll join us in the summer of 2016. This summer, Hillstead welcomes the following headlining poets. On Wednesday, June 22nd, Heather McHugh. On Sunday, July 10th, Brian Turner. On Wednesday, July 20th, Edward Hirsch. On Sunday, August 7th, United States Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera. And on Wednesday, August 17th, Kwame Dawes and the winners of the annual Hillstead Fresh Voices Student Poetry Competition.
Okay, I'll start with the poem that Karen quoted, just to start off with a poem called The Gate. I had no idea that the gate I would step through to finally enter this world would be the space my brother's body made. He was taller than me, a young man, but grown. Himself by then, done at 28. Having folded every sheet, rinsed every glass he would ever rinse under the cold and running water. This is what you have been waiting for, he used to say to me. And I would say, what? And he would say, this, holding up my cheese and mustard sandwich. And I'd say, what? And he'd say this, sort of looking around. Oh, you don't need to, thank you. Where's Gail Roby? Anywhere near here? Gail? Gail remembers, I lived in Cambridge for many years, and Gail lived in Arlington, and between where we lived was the Star Market on Massachusetts Avenue. This poem's called The Star Market. The people Jesus loved were shopping at the Star Market yesterday. An old lead-colored man standing next to me at the checkout breathed so heavily I had to step back a few steps. Even after his bags were packed, he still stood, breathing hard and hawking into his hand. The feeble, the lame, I could hardly look at them. Shuffling through the aisles, they smelled of decay, as if the Star Market had declared a day off for the able-bodied, and I had wandered in with the rest of them. Sour milk, bad meat, looking for cereal and spring water. Jesus must have been a saint, I said to myself, looking for my lost car in the parking lot later, stumbling among the people who would have been lowered into rooms by ropes, who would have crept out of caves or crawled from the corners of public baths on their hands and knees, begging for mercy. If I touch only the hem of his garment, one woman thought, could I bear the look on his face when he wheels around? So here's a poem about the winter, which will chill us out a little bit. You can imagine the winter. It's hard to imagine right now. I love the summer. Henry James, right, said the two most beautiful words in the English language were summer afternoon. So there's a couple of references in this. One is to Simone Weil, the great 20th century theologian and philosopher. One is to Meister Eckhart, the 14th century German theologian, and one is to Janis Joplin. This is called after the movie, but it really is secretly called After the Divorce. And the movie was the talented Mr. Ripley, remember? Matt Damon, when he was still a boy. After the movie, my friend Michael and I are walking home arguing about the movie. He says that he believes a person can love someone and still be able to murder that person. I say no, that's not love. That's attachment. Michael says, no, that's love. You can love someone, then come to a day when you're forced to think it's him or me, think me, and kill him. I say, then it's not love anymore. Michael says, it was love up till then, though. I say, maybe we mean different things by the same word. Michael says, humans are complicated. Love can exist even in the murderous heart. I say that what he might mean by love is desire. Love is not a feeling, I say. And Michael says, then what is it? We're walking along West 16th Street, a clear, unclouded night, and I hear my voice repeating what I used to say to my husband. Love is action, I used to say and say and say to him. Simone Weil says that when you really love, you are able to look at someone you want to eat and not eat them. Janis Joplin says, take another little piece of my heart right now. Meister Eckhart says that as long as we love any image, we are doomed to live in purgatory. Michael and I stand on the corner of 6th Avenue saying goodnight. I can't drink enough of the tangerine spritzer I've just bought. Again and again, I bring the cold can to my mouth and suck the stuff from the hole the flip top made. What are you doing tomorrow? Michael says. But what I think he's really saying is, you are too strict, Marie. You are a nun. Then I think, do I love Michael enough to allow him to think these things of me, even if he's not actually thinking them? Above Manhattan, the moon wanes, and the sky turns clearer and colder, although the days after the solstice have started to lengthen. We both know the winter has only begun. Thank you. So here's a poem called Courage that Karen talked about, courage. I'm helping my little girl slide down the pole next to the slide and bridge construction when a little boy walks up and says, "Why are you helping that young person do something that's too dangerous for her?" "Why do you say it's too dangerous?" I say. And he says, "She's too young." And I say, "How old are you?" And he says, 4.5. And I say, "Well, she's 3.5. He walks away. He comes back a little later and he says, "I'll show you how it's done," and climbs up the ladder and slides down the pole. Then he says, "She's too young." What happens is that when you get older, you get braver. Then he pauses and looks at me. "Are you brave?" "Brave?" I say, looking at him. "Are you afraid of Parasite 2? He says. And I say, "What's Parasite 2? And he walks away slowly, shaking his head. We're talking about, at lunch, we were talking about children. Who said it? You know, the days are long, but the years are fast. And my daughter is now 15. Here's just a tiny 4-line poem I wrote last year. I don't even know if it's a poem. I'm just reading some new stuff, but it's called 14. She's still mine for maybe a year or so. But she is looking past me through the funeral home door to where the boys have gathered in their dark suits. Thank you. So a lot of the new poems I've been writing are in the voice of Mary Magdalene. Remember our girl, Mary Magdalene? And she has always been, like so many of us, I think, so many women who grew up with these stories. Mary Magdalene is quite mysterious and very compelling. We don't know really anything about her, her past, except that it said that she was possessed by devils. But that could have been another Mary. We know that she was close to Jesus and that she... we know she was close to him. But I think of her as a woman who lives over time, through the centuries, you know, not just 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, but a woman who is subject of her own life, who is bewildered and searching for meaning, and who is sensual and, you know, a whole person. Here's Mary talking about Jesus. When Yahweh, the God of the old story, agreed to let the people hear his voice, it said that he allowed each person to hear what each could bear, to the very brim of that and no more. Afterwards, the people said, "Please, Moses, from now on you listen, no more. You do the talking and listening now." Being with Jesus was a little like that, as though he were a book too difficult to read. And I thought I had to become more than I was, more than I'd been. But that wasn't it. It turned out that something had to go. Something had to be let go of. I had so often been afraid to walk the road, not knowing what might be ahead. It wasn't that I saw something new or saw suddenly into him. Not that, not ever. But that the room itself, whatever room we might be standing in, became occasionally apparent. And the things in the room, a table, a cup, a meowing cat, assumed a clarity without a past. There's a couple of wonderful quotes from the Gnostic Gospels. Jesus said to them, when you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like below, and when you make the male and the female one and the same, so that the male not be male, nor the female female, and when you fashion eyes in the place of an eye, and a hand in place of a hand, and a foot in place of a foot, and a likeness in place of a likeness, then you will enter the kingdom of heaven. Here's Magdalene talking about the apostles. I suppose it's always like that with the teacher. Everybody wants to be special. Everybody wanted his gaze, as if it were water at noon. All those people bringing their sick children. The others, I love them like brothers, but sometimes they did seem ridiculous to me. Blustery, competitive. For me, it was different. I knew that even when he seemed not to be looking at me, he was. But of course, I was wrong about that too. And here's a poem called The Seven Devils, which is when Mary is trying to explain, Mary Magdalene, what those devils were. There's a reference to this in Luke chapter 8, verse 2, where he refers to her as Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 devils had been cast out. The 7 devils. The first was that I was very busy. The second, I was different from you. Whatever happened to you could not happen to me, not like that. The third, I worried. The fourth, envy, disguised as compassion. The fifth was that I refused to consider the quality of life of the aphid. The aphid disgusted me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The mosquito too, its face, and the ant, its bifurcated body. Okay, the first was that I was so busy. The second, that I might make the wrong choice because I had decided to take that plane that day, that flight before noon, so as to arrive early, and I shouldn't have wanted that. The third was that if I walked past a certain place on the street, the house would blow up. The fourth was that I was made of guts and blood with a thin layer of skin lightly thrown over the whole thing. The fifth was that the dead seemed more alive to me than the living. The sixth, if I touched my right arm, I had to touch my left arm. And if I touched the left arm a little harder than I'd first touched the right, then I had to retouch the left and then touch the right again so it would be even. The seventh, I knew I was breathing the expelled breath of everything that was alive, and I couldn't stand it. I wanted a sieve, a mask, I hate this word, a cheesecloth to breathe through that would trap it, whatever was inside everyone else that entered me when I breathed in. No, that was the first one. The second was that I was so busy. I had no time. How had this happened? How had our lives gotten like this? The third was that I couldn't eat food if I really saw it, distinct, separate from me, in a bowl or on a plate. Okay, the first was that I could never get to the end of the list. The second was that the laundry was never finally done. And the third was that no one knew me, although they thought they did. And that if people thought of me as little as I thought of them, then what was love? The fourth was that I didn't belong to anyone. I wouldn't allow myself to belong to anyone. The fifth was that I knew none of us could ever know what we didn't know. The sixth was that I projected onto others what I myself was feeling. The seventh, it was the way my mother looked when she was dying, the sound she made, Her mouth wrenched to the right and cupped open so as to take in as much air. The gurgling sound so loud we had to speak louder to hear each other over it, and that I couldn't stop hearing it. Years later, grocery shopping, crossing the street, no, not the sound. It was her body's hunger, finally evident, what our mother had hidden all her life. For months I dreamt of knuckle bones and roots, the slabs of sidewalk pushed up like crooked teeth by what grew underneath. The underneath. That was the first devil. It was always with me. And that I didn't think you, if I told you, would understand any of this. Okay, I'm going to read two more. In memory of everybody who's not here today, I'll read What the Living Do, and then I'll read one more short poem that has snow in it, too. What the Living Do. It's in the form of a poem, a letter to my brother. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there. And the Drano won't work, but smells dangerous. And the crusty dishes are piled up, waiting for the plumber I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky is a deep, headstrong blue. And the sunlight pours through the open living room windows because the heat's stuck on too high in here, and I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving, or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking. I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrist and sleeve, I thought it again. And again later when buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking. Slamming the car door shut in the cold. What you called that yearning. What you finally gave up. We want the spring to come. And the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call. A letter, a kiss. We want more and more, and then more of it. But there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you. Thank you. And I think I'll end with a poem called The Snowstorm, which was written from actually a monastery up on the Hudson River. Some of you may remember that in one of the Gospels, after Jesus is seen by his students, he comes to see them, or they see him, who knows what happened, but they see him in a room, and one of them, Thomas, is not there. And when he comes in, they say, we saw him, we saw him, we saw him. And Thomas, who's doubting Thomas, says, no, I'll believe it when I put my fingers in his side and in the wounds on his hands and feet. So there's a reference to that in here. The snowstorm. I walked down towards the river, and the deer had left tracks deep as half my arm that ended in a perfect hoof, and the shump sound my boots made walking made the silence loud. And when I turned back toward the great house, I walked beside the deer tracks again, and when I came near the feeder, little tracks of the birds on the surface of the snow I'd broken through. Put your finger here and see my hands. Then bring your hand and put it into my side. I put my hand down into the deer track and touched the bottom of an invisible hoof. Then my finger and the little mark of the J. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Sunken Garden, and all the sponsors.